When can I stop using the prong collar? When can I stop using the e-collar? When can I stop using treats in the training? We get this question a lot inside of our online training community and in our YouTube comments. So let me give you an example to help you understand the answer to this question. Imagine you had a city. And in this city, there was this real epidemic of speeding. People were just ignoring the laws of traffic, zipping down the roads. It was extremely dangerous, causing lots of accidents, and it was a big problem in the community. So the community board the city council gets together, and they decide they're gonna come up with this plan to fix speeding in their community. So they come up with this new plan. They're gonna implement these new fancy radar detectors. They're gonna have cops stationed in all these places. They're gonna implement hefty fines for speeding, right? And so on. So they go out and they implement this plan. 6 months go by and speeding is down 95%. 95%. So they have a big celebration, right? Hooray, it worked. You know, it was effective. Our communities are now much safer because of this. You know, it's much better for everyone. What do they do now? What do they do next? Do they continue enforcing these new laws? Or do they remove them? And it might sound obvious once you give a human example, right? Like, of course you have to maintain the law. Of course you have to keep enforcing the laws, right? If you remove the laws, they're just gonna go back to speeding, of course, right? And it sounds very obvious in a human example, but it's the same with dogs. In the same way that we humans set these walls and we have acceptable behaviors to select and unacceptable behaviors that have consequences, in the same way that we have those rules and consequences and laws, we do the same for dogs, right? Imagine you had a dog who you just never trained, right? They were completely untrained. You just let them be a dog, right? Well, they're gonna be peeing on the rug. They're gonna be eating your furniture. They're gonna be chewing on your shoes. They're gonna be barking out the window. They're gonna be lunging at other dogs. They're gonna ignore your recall. They're not gonna listen to you. Why? Because they're a dog. Simple as that, right? In the same way that a person might speed 120 miles down the road if there was no consequences. If there was no law preventing them from doing that, they might do that. Why? Because we're human. It's the same, right? And so as a trainer, when you're training your dog, what you're doing is you are carefully, very carefully, reinforcing specific behaviors. You're negatively reinforcing other behaviors. You're punishing other behaviors. And you're creating those walls. You're creating rules. You're creating structure. You're attaching consequences to certain behaviors. And you're creating these boundaries for your dog. And your dog starts to operate within the acceptable behavior range, right? In the same way that you operate in this acceptable behavior range as a human, right? So here's my big problem with this question, right? When you ask, when can I stop using the prong collar? When can I stop using the e-collar? When can I stop using food? It implies two things. The first thing it implies is once you teach your dog to do something, they will always do it. And the second thing it implies is I can go back to doing the old thing and not get the old results. And both of those things are completely untrue, right? The first thing, just because you taught your dog to do something does not mean they will always do it. Why? Because your dog is a dog and they have their own internal motivations and desires, their own instincts and impulses as a dog, right? Just because you taught your dog to come when you call them, that doesn't mean they'll always do it all of the time. You see what I'm saying? This is something that has to be maintained. When you remove the reinforcers and you remove the punishers, you remove these artificial walls that you set for your dog is gonna return to their old default state of behaving, right? And you can't be surprised when they do that because dogs are dogs, right? In the same way that laws are effective for humans because they're always in place and they always have consequences, It's the same thing with dogs. So as you work through the training program and you're learning how to use these tools, that's what they are. They're training tools that you're using to carefully manufacture the behaviors you're looking for. Now, once your dog is completely trained, they've been through the entire training program. They're completely trained on the leash, off leash. They know all of the behaviors. They're perfectly obedient. They make good decisions. Now, your tools go from being a training tool to being an insurance policy. Once your dog is completely trained and you have that e-collar on and you're going out on the walk, you will probably not have to use it, but it's there just in case you do. Just in case. When you take your dog out and you're at a new place and you clip the leash on, you probably don't need the leash, but it's there just in case you do. In the same way that when you get in the car, you put on your seatbelt. Do you need your seatbelt? Probably not, but it's there just in case you do. I'll give you a personal example. We've been traveling a lot recently, and every time we take our dog out, we have his e-collar on. Do we need it? Probably not, but it's there just in case we do need it. Why? Because dogs are creatures of impulse and instinct. They're dogs. And these walls that we set, we need to make sure that we're upholding the same rules, the same expectations, the same consequences consistently. Because imagine how weird it'd be if sometimes they broke the rules and there was a consequence and sometimes there wasn't. Imagine how confusing that'd be as a human. Imagine how confusing it'd be if sometimes you got a speeding ticket and sometimes you didn't. It would be confusing, it'd be unclear. And so we have to maintain the same rules and consequences that we set in the training. Now don't be mistaken, it's not that your dog will only listen when they have these tools on. That's not the case. When you're going through the training program and you're setting those walls and you're setting those rules and those expectations, you're creating a new baseline default mode of being, default behaviors, right? In the same way that when you're driving down the street, you don't only follow the laws of traffic when there's a cop right behind you, right? You follow the laws of traffic by default. And you have these tools in place with your dog as insurance policies just in case they do break the rules, just in case they do break the law, and you can provide the same consequence in the same way, and it's very clear and consistent for them. So I hope this video answers your question. In short, training is something that must be maintained. Just because you teach your dog to do something does not mean they will always do it forever. And you also cannot return to the old way of doing things and expect the old behaviors to not come back, right? If you want to keep these new, nice, default mode of being that you created in the training, you've got to maintain the same rules and the same consequences. You've got to be consistent, all right? I hope this video helps.